From London, this is the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden. Coming up on today's show, new contactless card tech comes to commuter lines into London. But first, bereaved families of victims who died in the Grenfell Tower fire say those complicit in the disaster must face justice, but they have to wait at least a further 2 years for any charges to be brought. It came as Sir Keir Starmer issued an apology from the British state to families and survivors following the publication of a damning inquiry report. However, charges for the appalling failures blamed for the blaze in June 2017 are not expected until 2026, with any court cases possibly only starting the following year, a decade after the tragedy.
We paid the price of systematic dishonesty, institutional indifference and neglect. The government ignored warnings about dangerous cladding from as early as 1991. It knew the risks but failed to prevent them, revealing the greed and profiteering of an industry that has been poorly regulated by governments over decades. It uncovers the systematic failings at the TMO and RBKC, which created a toxic, calculated culture which marginalised its residents. It shows the senior management at the London Fire Brigade knew about the risk of cladding fires but did nothing to prepare.
That's Natasha Elcock, Grenfell survivor and chair of Grenfell United, speaking on behalf of some of the families following publication of the inquiry's report.
You must become a government with the power and ability to separate itself from the construction industry and corporate lobbying. A government that prioritises and tackles the glaring structural injustices and social and racial inequalities of the people you serve. You must now finally make this the turning point for Britain. To the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, it's now on to you to deliver justice, to bring charges to those culpable for the deaths of our loved ones. We would like to thank the public for their continuous support of the bereaved survivors and the Grenfell community. You were there for us when it happened. We ask for you to continue to stand with us, to stand for what's right and help us in holding those responsible to account. Finally, to the 54 adults and 18 children whose lives got cut short in the most violent way, we will never give up fighting for justice for you, and you will forever be in our hearts.
The Prime Minister has also demanded swift justice, including through the criminal courts, for those to blame for the devastating blaze in West London, which killed 72 people. Now we're joined by Evening Standard political editor Nicholas Cecil.
I think the families of the victims of Grenfell, politicians, local members of the community, MPs, everyone's digesting this absolutely scathing report into what went wrong at Grenfell in 2017. Just reading it is just mind-boggling that the whole system was so flawed and in many ways so corrupt.
Why is the criminal investigation proceeding so slowly, and what are senior politicians saying on Thursday?
Well, on this, the government and the ministers are being very, very cautious. And the reason for this is that they don't want in any way to prejudice any future trials. So the Met Police are looking into this. They said that it could take 12 to 18 months before any prosecutions happen. The kind of offences that may have been committed are corporate manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter, perverting the course of justice, misconduct in public office, health and safety offences, fraud and possibly offences under the fire safety and building regulations. But these are very, very complex matters. And the law in Britain and in many other countries is often very designed to catch criminals in very simple cases. And whenever you get these complex cases of criminality, it's often harder to bring charges. So realistically, I think people are expecting, if they are court cases here, for them to take place first in about 2027. Now, this is 10 years after this horrific fire took place in West London. And many of the families and local community members say it's just simply too long. And Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, was on the media round this morning, and she was accepting that case very much, that kind of justice delayed is justice not delivered. So she's saying that the Met Police and the Crown Prosecution Service should press ahead with any possible charges as quickly as possible. But at the same time, she's acknowledging it is a complex area, and it was very, very careful not to try and put undue pressure on them or to prejudice any future trial.
What do we know about government plans around legislation for fire safety and building cladding?
Well, on this, I think the record is very, very poor by the government. Not this government, because obviously they're a new government. But if you looked back to the days after Grenfell Fire and in subsequent months and years, and you had minister after minister coming to the dispatch box saying this is an absolutely appalling tragedy, which everyone agrees on, and saying that swift action would be taken to deal with these shocking shortcomings in the planning system, building safety regulation system, and so on. But now everyone acknowledges not enough has been done. And if you look at it, there are some 4,600 other high-rise buildings with cladding where remedial work is needed. And that's only been completed in less than a third of them. And you have situations where you still have night marshals who basically stay in the building all night to make sure that if there is a fire, the residents can be woken and evacuated. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, was asked on the radio this morning, can you ensure that everyone in these buildings is safe? And she couldn't give that categoric assurance.
There's been a lot of criticism of politicians being too close to developers. Do you see this likely to change under the new Labour government? I
think it will. The whole system is very much corrupt to the core, basically because you had local authorities washing their hands of their responsibilities to ensure fire safety. You had private companies employing other private companies to do fire safety checks. And some of the companies doing the fire safety check had interest in building projects going ahead. So the whole system was flawed. And certainly the Cameron government, the coalition government as well, has faced some significant criticism in this report about its deregulation agenda. And effectively, that was put before ensuring lives were not put at risk.
Let's go to the ads. Coming up, it's a new dawn for Contactless with the tap-in tech soon to be rolled out across more commuter stations. Why not hit follow in the meantime? Give us a rating. Welcome back. Contactless train payments, it's something we take for granted in London, but there's plenty of routes that still don't have tap-in, tap-out technology. Now dozens more commuter towns are to be included in the next rollout of contactless train ticketing. With upgraded ticket barriers, it will mean passengers will avoid the need to buy a paper or digital ticket in advance, and they can just tap through for added convenience. So how will it work? To discover more, we're joined by Evening Standard Transport editor Ross Lydall. Ross, where will this contactless revolution be happening and how come it's taken so long?
Well, obviously, London travellers will be very familiar both with contactless and with Oyster. It was back in around 2005 when the Oyster card was first introduced, and it's been used for millions of journeys a day ever since. This was London's smart card, and it followed, the places such as Hong Kong and Shanghai and so on that had their own smart cards that avoided the need for paper tickets. So Londoners may be thinking, well, what on earth are you talking about? We've had contactless for years, and we have both, first as the Oyster card and then bank cards or smartphones, as many people use now, or their Apple Watch, and just click the device on the gate and through you go. What's happening here? This is part of the wider sort of improvements to the UK railways, which have been rather in the sort of slow lane for a number of years in terms of technology. And it's really the wider idea is to get people back on the train and back into the office or back travelling at weekends. And what's going to happen is that in a matter of weeks, probably just by the end of September, there will be 47 stations outside Greater London, but within the home counties, so in sort of Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, down in Surrey and so on, that will join the contactless network. And then a further 45 on top of that will then be added to the network next year, probably in the second half of next year. Now, the stations that will join in a couple of weeks' time, these include stations such as Basildon, Berkhamsted, Southend Central and Sevenoaks. And then next year, they will be joined again by Harlow, Bishop Stortford, Luton and Leatherhead amongst the 45. So good news if you're travelling on services run by, say, Greater Anglia or Thameslink or Chiltern.
So, for example, it would mean you're able to, say, tap in at Bishop Stortford, tap out at Liverpool Street and get on the tube as normal. So will charging work like a travel card?
The good news is it will work like a travel card if you use the same bank card. So, many people probably have 2 or 3 different accounts, but keep using the same card and it will work a bit like a travel card. In the promise is that essentially daily and weekly journeys will be capped at the same level as if you'd actually bought a paper travel card. So what that means, for example, is in your example, if you come in from Bishop Stortford, get off the train at Liverpool Street, but then want to jump on the tube, get on the Central Line or the Circle Line at Liverpool Street and make another journey to your workplace, do the same in reverse when you're going home, but then possibly either, pop out in the evening or make a journey at lunchtime too. Once you reach the cap, as if you'd bought the ticket by the sort of paper ticket for the same day. Once you reach the value of journeys, the paper ticket would have cost, your account essentially will be closed and you won't face any higher charge. So that is the benefit, that people who not just use the train but use TfL services as well on the same day or even in the same week, the total cost you will pay will be capped. So that is the benefit here of continuing to use the same contactless card for all journeys.
So this new cross-operator ticketing tech should help people avoid getting caught out with fares and being fined?
Yes, one of the biggest problems under the current system is that there are a number of anomalies for particular lines or sort of areas where the train operators seek to impose peak fares. Now, for example, if you are using the Stansted Express from either Liverpool Street or Tottenham Hale to the airport, you have to buy a dedicated ticket, a Great Anglia ticket. You cannot use Oyster because it's outside the Oyster zone, and you cannot use contactless card at present. However, the problem is that the barriers you pass through at Liverpool Street or at Tottenham Hale to go to the airport are the same barriers for many other services within London and within Oyster and within contactless. So what happens to many unknowing passengers is that they click through the barriers to start their journey, say with their bank card. They get to the airport and find they can't click back out. And then you've got a chap with a sort of high-vis jacket on saying, you've bought the wrong ticket, you'll have to pay the full fare and you'll also have to pay a penalty fare as well. So misery all round, extra money for the train companies, although they probably rather that people just bought the correct ticket in the first place. So when contactless reaches the airport, probably in the second half of next year, that problem will be removed. So that is good news. The one thing that it will be an ongoing issue, though, is for people who use travel cards or for children, because the contactless system will always charge the adult fare. So, for example, children over a certain age, generally over 11, normally over 5 for the rail companies, over 11 for TfL service, have to use their own card, and that's a cheaper card. But if you want a child fare, you have to still buy a special child ticket for the railways. You can't just use mum or dad's bank card because, of course, the bank card won't know that it's being held by the child. So therefore, to get a child ticket, you still have to buy it. Similarly, if you want to use, say, a family rail card or a senior citizens rail card and want a discounted fare, you will also have to either buy a digital ticket or a paper ticket before you travel to make sure you get the cheapest fare.
There's much more news and features in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk. The Standard podcast is back tomorrow, Friday at 4 p.m.